Well, it's good to meet some of you. I know we've got a lot of Canadian friends here tonight, and I'd like to reassure all of them. And I know that Canadians follow American politics more than Americans follow Canadian politics. That was pointed out to me earlier this evening. And there's a good reason for that. It's because there's a good reason for why the rest of the world follows our politics more than vice versa, and that's because we're the ones bombing the shit out of them. So they have more of an interest in this. But long story short is that you might think that Mr. Obama won the recent election, but Mr. Obama did not win the recent election. The same person won the election last week or 2 weeks ago that wins every election, and that is the American non-voter. Okay, that's the majority in America, and I'm here to tell you that I think that's a very healthy thing, and I think that's a very good thing. And here's why, is because electoral politics don't work. Okay, voting for people and trying to get your guy or gal to beat the other side and get a few more votes so that you can sort of force your will on the other side, it doesn't work. And here's why. It's because politics doesn't lead. Politics follows. Okay, culture leads and politics follows. The reason why the left is winning in America, they're winning in Canada, they're winning all over the world, and when I say the left, I mean statists generally, is because they control media, they control pop culture and entertainment, they control academia and public schools, top to bottom, okay? So millions upon millions upon millions of American citizens believe deep in their hearts, and on an emotional level, not a logical or reason level, things that are preposterously untrue, that cannot be true, and that are demonstrably false, proven by history time and time and time again. And no matter how you slice and dice it, it all comes down to the same sort of bottom line idea, which is that somehow we can all pay, let's say $10 in taxes and get $20 worth of stuff back from the government. And it cannot be. And the problem is that when you pay $10 of tax to Washington, D.C., $7 of that $10 is consumed by the middleman, known as the bureaucracy itself, and the other $3 is sent out into the country in some very nefarious and counterproductive ways. So obviously, if you've been listening to Ron Paul for the last 35 years, you know that our currency, our U.S. dollar, is in big, big trouble, and the rest of the world is starting to know that too. And there's going to come a point in time where you're going to be able to buy oil, even maybe from OPEC, without having to use U.S. dollars to do so. And maybe that's the straw that's going to break the camel's back. I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody's that smart to know how it's going to happen. Maybe it's going to happen rapidly because of a world event. Maybe it's going to happen slowly in sort of a long, slow decline that hurts our children and our grandchildren very much. My kids are little, so I'm in the let's get it over with camp. But, everybody's got different situations. But I will say this. Speaking, for Ron Paul, he's very, very, very positive. I mean, here's a 77, 78-year-old guy, by his own account, not a great speaker, sort of a boring guy, 5 kids, really straight-laced family life. And he can go to a college campus in Berkeley, California, and have 7,000 kids come out on a weekday going crazy like it's a Beatles concert, okay, cheering him when he says end the Fed, cheering him when he says get out of Afghanistan, okay? And he can go to a campus in Utah, which is full of a bunch of Mormon kids, largely white Mormon audience, and he can say, what you do with your own body isn't really the government's business. We really don't need to invade Iran. And he can get huge cheers for the same speech he gives in Berkeley. So I do think that there's a tremendous amount of hope out there. And it's only because things are so bad and that there's a certain segment of the population that's just reality-based. And deep down, and they know that what Ron Paul has been saying is correct. And so I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist. I think liberty is very much like the black market. It always finds ways to seep through the cracks. No matter what governments do, human beings have a natural desire to be free. They have a natural desire to conduct business. They have a natural desire to have peace, because without peace, you can't raise your kids, you can't conduct business, you can't have a good standard of living. Wars always make the government more powerful and the country that's waging that war poorer because it expends resources. We have an enormous military. We have a terrible dollar, and we have horrible tax and fiscal policies. So, where does this all leave us today? I don't think Mr. Obama's victory means much at all. He got a few million more votes than Mitt Romney. I mean, was Mitt Romney's policies dramatically different at the end of the day? No, they were not. And what's more troubling about it is not sort of the policy differences, but rather that so much of the country saw him as a capitalist or representing free markets or representing, freedom and the liberty message, which Mitt Romney was none of the above. He was very much a big government Republican in the same mold as George Bush. So from my perspective, I'm all for a conservative America in the lifestyle and cultural sense, but I'm not for conservative politics. I'm for deeply radical politics or no politics. And I think that there's going to be a new awakening, a new dawn in America. I'm convinced of it, and if I wasn't convinced of it, I would be taking my kids and leaving. But I'm not doing that. So, at the end of the day, I think we vote with our feet, and those people who do leave America, I absolutely understand that. God bless them, and I think there's a lot of good reasons to do so. But, here we've got a worldwide dollar. If you look at past currency crises, whether it was Germany or whether it was more recently Argentina or whatever it was never a global currency. So I'm not convinced that there's anywhere to hide from this one. And, I'll leave you with that. But, again, I'm a firm believer in liberty. I think it's a natural state of human beings, and I think no matter how much government suppresses it, there's still a libertarian tendency among Americans. I still think at the end of the day, there is a don't tread on me element to America. And I think it's probably represented really well at this table here tonight. So God bless, guys.
Okay, we're going to kind of turn this over to you folks. I want to start out with Michael Berry. Chris, I'd like you to weigh in on this thing too, if you would. And, we don't want to make this thing formal. It sounds formal because we got this microphone, et cetera, but this is kind of, it's a very big issue for what we're trying to do, but it's a non-issue for this because we don't have any, obviously, amplifiers or anything. So all we want to get, I don't give a damn what anybody says, okay? I don't care. I'm a real believer in freedom of speech, et cetera. But I'd really like to know what anybody in this room, how you want to weigh in on this thing. What do you think? Are we going in a good direction or a negative direction? Mike?
Well, thank you, Al. You put me on the spot here a little bit, but I guess my feeling is that I was a professor at the University of Virginia for 8 years, and it was pretty much of a down experience. And so I would second Jeff's idea that we need to start with our schools and we need to start with education. And what I do at these kinds of seminars, basically, I try to pick a topic. Today I spoke on fiscal cliff and what it really means. Where are we? Will it happen? Won't it happen? What's coming in terms of taxation? And I was in Spokane a couple of weeks ago, and I spoke on QE3. I lecture to the Fed twice a year. They hate me, but that's okay. They listen. It's interesting when you go to the Fed, the Federal Reserve, and I do a 3-hour lecture there. And I've done it for 9 years now, so I've got a pretty good set of data that goes through this whole crisis that we've been through, and it has been a heck of a crisis. You realize that the people that you're talking to are just like you and me. They're not really governors of Feds. They're not the head of a Fed bank. What they really are people who have families. And so what they're really interested in is, what do I do? How am I gonna get my kids through school? How do I send them to university when university tuition costs $20,000? How am I going to plan these things out? And believe me, we normally have 100 to 120 people from all across the country, the Fed, the FDIC, the controller of the currency, et cetera, et cetera. They all come. And they're all concerned. So, we tend to think of this monolithic government, but it is run by people, and they have feelings just like you and I have, and they're all worried. So I was a professor, as I mentioned, at University of Virginia in economics. I did my doctorate at Arizona State, and I was a mathematician, so as Jeff, we were talking earlier, it was easy to do economics in the 80s and 90s because if you knew a little math and a little microeconomics, you could fly through this stuff. And the prevailing opinion was that all markets were efficient and that you couldn't make a buck. And of course, I got really tired of that, so I gave up a tenured full professorship, chaired professorship. My father never forgave me for that. Nevertheless, I decided that the people who really know what they're doing are not the economists, even though I am one. They are the psychologists. The psychologists know about behavior, and behavior is what runs a country and how people react to the message. So it is critically important that we begin to think about our schools. And again, I say is when I come to do a presentation here, I don't really talk about gold or silver or this company or that company very much. I talk about where are we going, and I tend to focus on things like currency. So, you know, we are at a point, I said actually one of my slides today, I said that as of November 6th, we are now officially an entitlement economy. Jeff might disagree with me on that, but we are going to have tax increases. They are going to be significant. One of the statistics I had showed, I happen to live in New Jersey, unfortunately, and in New Jersey, the median family income is $101,000. And if we go over fiscal cliff, and the government cannot agree to agree, that will cost the median householder $7,000 a year. So that kind of a situation is penurious, and what it means is that we will be heading into a very serious recession. I don't think there's any way we'll avoid it unless they decide to push this all down the road like they did August the 1st of 2011, where they said, gee, we have 17 months to correct what we've done in 50 years, and so we can do that. And here we are 45 days away from sequestration, and nobody can agree to agree, and President Obama says, I will not reduce the taxes on the 2% of wage earners in the country, period. And that's where he stands. And so I think we have a serious problem in Washington, on both sides, of being able to agree. But there's a bigger problem, and the bigger problem I see is our currency. A country benefits when they have a stable, strong currency, and that's what I focus on. That's why I think everybody should own some gold in their portfolio, and you've seen what gold has done over the years. Post-war, we had Bretton Woods. I know you know this story. And Bretton Woods was supposed to be the solution because the United States was and still is the strongest power in the world. And so for about 15 years, we lived high on the hog in this country. We did it because we had the reserve currency. Our currency was tied to gold, and every other currency was tied to our currency. And this worked fine until about 1968 or 1969, when our French allies and our British allies decided that they would send dollars back to us because we were inflating. By the way, that's exactly what the Fed wants to do now, is inflate. They've given up the idea of, they're focusing now on jobs and given up the idea of, because they're deathly afraid of deflation. So anyways, about 1968 or 1969, we started to get a lot of gold flowing out of the country and a lot of paper coming back. And that's, of course, you all remember when President Nixon came on TV and said, temporarily we're going to decouple. And since then, we've gone through a series of processes where we now have in the world what's called a dirty float. A dirty float is exactly that. It allows everybody to manipulate their currencies. You know, it's funny when you look at capital markets and you see how people say, well, there's no manipulation. The SEC takes care of us. The CFTC takes care of us. They're not manipulating gold and silver, but yet they're manipulating interest rates and they're manipulating currencies. So it is the policy of the Fed to inflate, and inflation means the dollar value falls. And it also means that taxes are going to increase. And I don't think, while taxes will certainly increase, for example, dividends may be taxed at the ordinary income rate now, which is a significant increase. You should really read the whole tax thing. It's very interesting. So I think we have slower growth. I think it's up to every family, every person that represents a family at this table tonight, to think about these issues and to start planning for how to move forward, to carry the message to their congressmen and their senators, to get people out to vote and to teach people where we are in this cycle. We will not recover in this country until we have a new credit cycle. The credit cycle is now broken, and we're pushing it down the road. We're not deleveraging fast enough, in my opinion, and so I think that's really where we are at this stage of the game. 2013 will probably be a very tough year. I think it'll be a 0.5% to a full percent decline in GDP, and I think, now the good news, there is good news, okay, so don't cry in your beer just yet. The good news is the rest of the world is beginning to understand quality of life because everybody has a BlackBerry or some kind of digital deal. And so they want higher quality of life. So you're going to see higher commodity prices. You're going to see gold go much higher. We'll have $5,000 gold within a year, 2, 3, 5 years. And we'll have $150 silver. And I know you're saying, I'm crazy, but believe me, did you ever think you'd see $1,700 gold 10 years ago? I think we'll have a new monetary system within the next decade, and the new monetary system, so we will replace the dollar. I think we'll replace the dollar probably at 10 cents on the dollar. I think we'll have to because we do have a huge debt load. And hopefully the new currency system will be a more sound approach, a less volatile approach, an approach that can't be manipulated. So I've sort of gabbed about a lot of things, but that's kind of where I see that we are today and where we're going, and you need to think about these things.
Okay. Well, I'll be mercifully brief because those are two tough acts to follow. You know, I do think, just sort of echoing what Jeff and my father said, that education is the key. And I have a 5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old daughter back home in New York, and you know, one of the ways that I have chosen to educate them up a little further is about currency and about what true value really is. And when my first daughter was born, for Christmas for her, I decided to start a tradition, and every year I buy her a gold and a silver coin and I put it under the tree. And I think it's great, and obviously people around the table do as well. But what's been very interesting to me is the eerie stone silence exhibited by my family members around the Christmas tree, because it's not a traditional gift. It's not a toy from China, or it's not a bike. It's actually something that's worth something, and it's something that retains its value. And this is the way that I've chosen to educate my children, because, you know, Jeff, you talked about a new dawn, and I think that this is one of the ways that I hope to be able to foment something like that. But it's really interesting. I mean, I've got smart friends, and I use quotation marks. I mean, these are Harvard Business School graduates, for example, and they don't understand value, and they don't understand what's happening out there. And so that's just my take on how I've chosen to raise my children and educate them. So thank you.
I didn't actually start on the Pacific Exchange. I graduated University of Virginia with an English degree, and I find it very striking that the difference in opportunities today, they're not quite so many as there were back then. I graduated with an English degree and really no trepidation at all about the world. My first job was as a newspaper reporter for my local, the Atlantic City Press. And after 7 years of that, I went to the Pacific Stock Exchange and was an options market maker. For better or worse, my 20-year-old son is majoring in English, and he came to it with a very strong interest in success in high school math. And I look and I think, is this really the way you want to go? And I don't see many jobs for English majors out there. And it's going to be a very difficult world. More and more kids are graduating from school. I do agree with the statement that all of the opportunities will come through education. But I have to say that the trend is not heartening. Students are majoring in all the wrong things. They're learning the wrong things. And they're not moving they don't have even the chance, the opportunity to move the economy in the right way. So that as far as the educational solution, we're sort of going in third gear the wrong way. And to reorient to reorient the schools really requires a sea change in the way students come to college. Instead of majoring in art history and English, they should want to come and study engineering, the sciences, and I think that's the only thing that's going to lift us. And I went to a dinner a week ago, and the featured speaker was Michael Milken. And it's amazing how Michael Milken is really so fired up, and he's involved in so many amazing things. He's got thousands of people working for him. And even though his own agenda is very positive, very results-oriented, he's a guy who has sort of come at it. He was in prison for a while for trumped-up charges of insider trading. And he came out wanting to do as many good things as he could, and he's changing the world medically speaking. He's got a lot of dollars invested in prostate research and also cystic fibrosis, but he's got think tanks all over the world kind of rethinking the way countries can best kindle the entrepreneurial fervor that used to exist in the USA. He mentioned that in this country, in the US, over the next 10 years, there will be ample demand for 125 million skilled workers. In other words, students who come out of college with engineering and science degrees. But at the best estimate, really, is that we'll have about 50 million Native Americans to fill those jobs. So the jobs really are there. It's just a question of when the students sort of come around and get more energetic and realize that they're going to have to hit the books and do the math, so to speak, to bring the country around. I think the election politically was not a good course. I think we're really hell-bound for hell. And I'd love to be able to blame Obama for what's about to happen. I think that we're going to be essentially the economy is not going to escape the implosion of a derivatives edifice that is verging on $2 quadrillion. That's a lot of zeros. And I think that really represents the destructive force that's out there. It's a deflationary force. And with all the trillions the government has pumped into the economy, there has been no surmounting deflationary drag. So I think that if we're going to have change, if positive change is going to come, unfortunately, it's not going to come as part of a process. People aren't going to say any more than they did when they voted that we can really make things happen. I think we're going to have very severe adversity bring about those changes. In other words, everybody's going to have the epiphany at the same time that our country is bankrupt, that the dollar is worthless, and that we have to face the consequences. So Obama, Romney, it really didn't make much difference. Neither one had any real answers. And the only answer all along has been the economic answer of letting the chips fall. Someone mentioned that we had a chance to get out of our problems a couple years ago, 2008, but it's become a lot more costly. And it's becoming more costly still as we kick the can down the road. So I'm hopeful that in the wake of whatever is about to occur, that we come out of it with a little more fervor about, with the knowledge that there's no free lunch and that we all have to work a little bit harder, or actually much harder, because we're going to be competing with the world to bring our standard of living up. It's dropped dramatically. We tend to look at inflation statistics and they're all kind of fudged. They don't really mean much. But I think in ways that people recognize in their lives, when you talk about a decline in the standard of living, it's really, to me, it's two-income households that have to borrow against a home to put their kids through college. In other words, two professional incomes are barely cutting it these days, not really putting much away in savings. And that's probably the biggest piece of the decline that people must sense in their own lives. So we really have to kind of walk through the valley. We've got a very difficult stretch to get through. It's anybody's guess how far we can continue to kick the can down the road, but I think probably at least half the people or more at this table are in agreement that the cannot be kicked too much further down the road. So I agree that 2013 is going to be a very, very tough year, and especially if we begin to pay the piper by way of higher taxes. So I'm not really optimistic about the next couple of years, but I hope that we can emerge from whatever happens with enough self-knowledge, and we'll be at least out of that out of denial, and we can come roaring back, and maybe the entrepreneurial spirit that helped America become great is revived.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, you guys, we're going to take, we're going to take a little break here just for a second. I'm going to leave you with a funny story that I think really, really summarizes what everybody's saying here. I sat on the board of directors of a bank for 22 years, and it was a very interesting situation because during the Clinton administration, the CRA came in, Community Reinvestment Act came in, and the Community Reinvestment Act basically told us we were a bank that made all of our money on real estate transactions, and the Community Reinvestment Act mandated that we had to loan money to, being perfectly blunt, people who didn't even come close to qualifying for the loans. Now, I was the token Caucasian on the board. Everybody else were the Chinese guys, and they became really, really close friends of mine. But when the Fed came in and and audited us once a year, et cetera, and it became very obvious what we had to do, I was sitting on the loan committee during that time, the director, representative on the loan committee, and I was looking at these applications that were just amazing. Let me tell you, absolutely amazing. Well, our chairman, a guy out of Hong Kong by the name of Fai Chan, and our president, a guy by the name of David Chen, who worked under the, who did he work under? Bush Sr. I think he was agricultural secretary or something like that. But we all basically got together after this act came in, and since we made most of our money on real estate, and we really, Mike, you may find this hard to believe, but we really wanted to retain profitability. Hard to believe, but true. Okay, you know what we did? We started shopping the bank, and you know what? We sold our bank about 2 years later. Thank you, big government. Anyway, let's have dinner. Enjoy that. And we'll continue later if you guys want to. I know you were the main fundraiser for President Obama, and we want to have the other side of the story right here, sir.
No, I'm Dudley Baker, so I pretty much agree with some of the previous statements here. I mentioned on the podium several years ago, most of us here are in the mining business, and it's like, how do you position yourself, your portfolios, to maybe prepare for what may be coming? So at the time, gold was maybe 700, and hitting a high at 700. And my comment was, kind of be careful what you wish for when you hear the, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, 5,000. That's not going to happen without a lot of turmoil in the world. And so, we may think we win, and in a way maybe we have short term, but it's going to be a lot of trouble for friends, family, and people around the world. My situation, I've actually lived outside the U.S. for now 13 and a half years. So I moved down about 1999, lived full-time in Mexico. To me, this really helps give me a different perspective on the world and from investments, and especially in the mining arena with so many companies in Mexico. This has really been a cool journey. But, I think this whole situation is, with the politics, but with the U.S. debt, I mean, the country is just so divided. It's just incredible. It's I like to think that one of the main problems with, say, in the United States, if you look at the Senate and the House, I don't know the numbers, but I bet you that 95% of all those individuals are all attorneys. And just think, if everybody here was an attorney, we couldn't agree on anything. And where Ron Paul is one of the few I can think of that is not an attorney. And that's why he's probably so, has some different views and is widely respected, and especially in our arena here. So but I just think that would be, if I was in control, I'd say no more attorneys running for public office. You're off the list. We want the housewives of the world, the truck drivers, get the good old boys making sensible, sane decisions maybe. My kids, if they see this before Christmas, I think what I've already learned, they're going to get some gold or silver for Christmas. And they're not going to be happy campers with that decision. But I think that was a wise statement that somebody made. I did have several friends and subscribers of mine, my services, that weeks ago were saying, Dudley, and the direct comment was, if Obama wins re-election, they were going to seriously think about leaving the United States. And that's a bold statement, and not everybody is in a position to make that decision. And I always think, well, if you're in a position, that's one thing, but really think the whole situation out. What does that really mean? And how many are truly in a position to make that happen? So all of our circumstances are different. Mine were totally different. But everybody is so opinionated right now, and this is a big world. And those that are living in the United States thinking that they're going to get away from U.S. taxes, good luck, guys, because U.S. citizens are taxed on worldwide income, and I think the only country like that. So IRS has a big reach in the world, So always be careful and know your whole game plan, and to really think this out. But I think the politics in the states is just so incredible right now. It's like it is hard to see what is the end game. The debt's going to be a killer, and it's hard to see how you really work yourself out of this situation without just a terrible catastrophe and terrible end. And I don't know exactly what that means, but we may find out, I think, sooner rather than later.
I'm Larry Amernick. I'm president of the Technical Security Analysts of San Francisco. I do research for a living, so I don't have an axe to grind in the game. I have a different take on what I've heard this evening. And actually what I got to say is a little more optimistic. Before 2020, the United States is going to be energy independent. And that is a big game changer here globally. And we're also going to have a revolution here in nanotechnology. And the economy in 2020 is going to be markedly different than what we have. There will be vast new jobs being created. The housing crisis will probably be over sometime around 2018. I mean, you could do the demographics on it, and it sort of works out that way. This coming year is going to be absolutely dreadful. The first year of a second presidential term traditionally is moribund. It's usually horrible. And we've been in a 4-year bull market. It's old. It has nothing to do with politics or anything. It's old, and it's tired. And Jim and I were talking earlier, Jim Forte, is that it's possibility that we may have already seen the peak of this cycle. Ian, who was up on stage earlier, was alluding to that. There are certain parameters that, using logical operators, if certain things are not met in the next 3 weeks, we probably have seen the peak of the cycle for this cycle. But how long it will go down, who knows? It will do what it does. But things are not absolutely horrible. The people who are doom and gloom are loaded. They have money. They fear losing everything. But if you travel around the country and you see lots of people who don't have anything, and they're optimistic because they see them building their lives together. They don't have anything to lose. They don't pay attention to the budget deficit or the physical cliff.
And these people are working at jobs that don't pay a lot, and they're going to school at night. And you see lots of immigrants coming in and just very optimistic. And you see the people who have things to lose are the people who are the most pessimistic. And probably through creative destruction, yeah, a lot of people who have money will lose it, but other people who aren't so pessimistic are basically going to be the ones to basically take up the slack. The other positive thing is demographic. And it's an unintended consequence of the poor economy. You have a lot of people between the age of 20 and 30 who can't afford to live outside of their parents' home. So a lot of people have moved back with their parents. And what that's done, as an unintended consequence, has provided an undercurrent of stability, a renewal of family life that basically has been torn apart for the last 40 years, where you've had huge amounts of divorces and broken homes in the United States. And we're seeing a healing of that. And that's a really good thing. And one of the other good things, corporate balance sheets are healthy. Everybody bitches about this, but the actual private sector, the public sector, is actually relatively healthy. And the financial system now is a lot healthier than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And even if we go over this physical cliff, it might not be the end of the world. Even Warren Buffett came out and said he had his cranks. Well, we don't know. The point, though, is, and in my view, I think on Christmas Eve, you're going to see a photo op at the White House as they make an agreement to kick it down the road for 6 months. Because this is what we always do. We muddle through in this country. You know, the worst thing is not the income tax going up. It's the death tax that goes back up to 55% and goes down to people with $1 million of net assets. That's the worst possibility. That's worse than raising taxes on anybody. And I have a feeling they were going to try to maybe kick that one down the road until they can somehow overhaul the tax system over a period of time. But really, if you look at it logically, they have to muddle through. They can't basically make major decisions. Most of them are too complex. So the best thing they can do is put off decision making and take the most onerous things and kick them down the road, make compromises. And I just don't think it's going to be as doom and gloom as Peter Schiff was talking about. You know, we do have, this is a vibrant economy. And there, you know, I was just spent a week down in South Florida. I'd been going there every now and then for a long time. I have family down there. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the people that worked in the service industries were the Cubans. And they came in and they were dirt poor, and they've worked themselves up to the middle class and more, and they own a lot of the real estate and businesses. And then you had the Haitians. And you came in the 80s and 90s, and you had the Haitians there. And now you're starting to notice Haitians living in middle-class communities. And now the latest are the Jamaicans. And the Jamaicans are working in all the service industries, including the airlines. You go to the airport, and all of a sudden you hear a flight announced, and it's somebody that sounds like Bob Marley. And so it's just sort of interesting that we just have this dynamic process of immigration, of people who come here and don't feel entitled to anything. And the people that do are basically going to lose. But there are a lot of other people here to fill the void. And because the country is dynamic and it's messy, and it will always be that way. And I guess that's it. Hey, thank you.
You know, I want to thank you all very, very much for your comments on this. I think they were obviously, everything was unscripted. You guys told it like it was, and I certainly appreciate that. You've known for a long time where I stand. You know what? We need to get our act together, because without capitalism and free markets, we're not going anywhere. Mr. Deist.
Well, I will wrap this up and be brief, but I want to end on a positive note as well. Forget the government. Ignore the government. Governments can fall apart very quickly once they cannot any longer provide what they claim to provide. Once the government can't give everyone Social Security and Medicare, or only with hyperinflated dollars, it'll be like the former Soviet Union, where that quickly, in just a matter of weeks or months, faith in all these ridiculous things that the federal government claims it provides, none of which it does, will be gone. So forget about the government. Don't even think about the government. Work around the government to the extent you can in your personal lives and in your business lives. And you might check out Harry Brown's book from the 70s, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. The great, late Harry Brown. That's an amazing book, and it'll change your mindset about, because if we allow government to sort of make us depressed and down, then it's already taking away our liberty in terms of our mental well-being. And if you just step back and look at America, as bad as our schools are, we have a relatively educated workforce compared to the rest of the world. We have abundant timber. We have abundant oil and natural gas if our dumb government would get out of the way. And most importantly, perhaps, we are a breadbasket to the world. America can easily feed itself and still have enough left over to export. A lot of countries can't do that. If there's a fiscal crisis, Japan imports everything, food-wise and a lot of other things. So we got plenty of food. We got plenty of energy. I still believe we have generally good people in America. And the only thing we have to do now is get rid of the bad government. So thanks and God bless.